Hi, Mistake Lab.
Hello from California.
And hello from Texas. We are having a really interesting session today. Our February 2021 Mistake of the Month is going to talk about sensory, specifically focusing on tactile.
One of the things that is important to mention from Mistake Club, and the Mistake of the Month is something that we are asked a lot, and they ask us if we are experts on the field that we're talking about. We are not. We, however, find the experts to give us their perspective on a certain topic. And after we learn that, that's when we share this information.
We found wonderful experts who shared their knowledge with us and activities and a lot of wonderful content. And one of the things we wanted to do was to interview moms of children with tactile sensory issues. A lot of moms were very happy to share their experiences in person, in private, but they didn't really feel comfortable talking about this in public.
I didn't ask the reasons for the mothers not to share their experiences, but I understand that they don't want their children to be labeled, and they don't want to create a bigger issue than what they have. So it is really, it makes even more important for us to talk about it openly from our experience.
So let's talk a little bit about our kids.
I have two children. Karen, she's 12, and Emilio, he is 6, and they have different personalities, of course. Karen doesn't really have any sensory issues. She's her own, and but Emilio, I wouldn't say he has an issue per se. He just, the way he processes the world is through his senses, especially the tactile. He needs to touch things in order for them to really get embedded in his head.
My gal, who's 3.5 years old, is the most amazing daughter. Everything on my checklist for my perfect child and more. And when she was younger, we were lucky enough that she was in a daycare where the teacher her specialty was sensory development. So I started to notice some behaviors, some movements and things she still needs to move a lot, touch everything, jump on the couch constantly. And you would say, well, every child does that. What's weird about that? And that's true. So we started to treat it as something that needed more attention when two parameters changed. One thing was when things happened for longer than you would expect, and also the frequency of when all these incidents happened. So once we realized that it affects her ability to concentrate, for example, or if you can really see that she does not want to touch something, but she can't help herself. She has to. She just absolutely has to. She's not trying to be annoying, but something interesting that when we interviewed one of our experts for this month, Julie Robbins, who is an occupational therapist, she said something very interesting.
Is that we can be both over and undersensitive to any one of those types of inputs. So you might have a child that seems like they seek and they really need a lot of tactile input, but at other times they might be like, oh, that's aversive to me.
So one of the things that I was curious, because I know you and I know what an amazing and involved mom you are in your children's lives, and you have shared with me some of your solutions and some of your ideas how to help Emilio receive the sensory stimulus that he needs. So could you share with everyone some of the ideas? Because I think a lot of parents could benefit from those very creative, fun, and pretty easy to implement ideas.
One of the things that I noticed is that he moves his feet a lot. So I needed to give him something to do with his feet. And I found a couple of deflated basketballs, and I just put them, they have different sizes, and the deflated ball, I just put them in his feet, and he likes how I swift and moves and how they feel they have this rough texture. So it helps him with like let go of that energy on his feet. One thing that his teachers recommended was to have a wobbly stool. So he sits on it and kind of wobbles. And I switch them from like a regular chair to the stool throughout the day. So he has like a different kind of setting. One more thing that I do is I have some like different texture around for him to touch. A piece of cord or a balloon with textures. I'm gonna share the activity about that in another video. And then under the desk, on the one desk that I don't use, I put a sleeping bag and a pillow. And when he feels overwhelmed, he goes and hides there, and that's where he likes to read. It sounds counterintuitive because I am offering him a lot of sensitive experiences that could be distractive for an adult, but because he is processing the world around him, it really is very effective. One of the things that I read is that kids outgrow, most of them. We all had some issues when we were children because that's part of who we are. Where our brains are growing, they're maturing, they're experiencing the world for the first time. And then it mellows down and we either outgrow those sensory issues or we kind of learn how to cope with them. Like, your tag is itchy, it's a tag, I'll fix it later, because you know it is fixable. But children don't know that. They are experiencing the world for the first time and they don't know it has a solution, and their brain keeps sending them information. Now, sometimes that child that has that issue is a child that snatches toys out of other kids' hands in the playground, is that kind of kid that approaches your child and wants to hug and kiss him or her. And that kind of creates a reaction in community that you're like, what's wrong with that child? The mother is not doing her job. And we become really judgy.
I was just watching this week Mayim Bialik's podcast Breakdown, which if you guys have not seen it or heard it, I highly recommend. It's wonderful. So in her most recent episode, she interviewed the guy who created the Big Bang Theory. And he has some of those sensory issues. He talked about it very openly. And he said that what he does when he goes to a place that he knows is going to be overwhelming for him with sensory stimulation, he prepares himself. He creates a plan. And he said, and again, I highly recommend you listen to the entire conversation. It's fascinating, but he mentioned how once he has a plan, he's going to be fine. And it doesn't matter what it is. And that's very interesting because, for example, I told you that Gal is under reactive to tactile, but she's overreactive to sound. So she could cry if someone is ringing the doorbell, because it's too much for her. Neta Shani, who we are interviewing in this newsletter, she used to treat her, and she explained to me that it's like when you hear a sound and it sounds like a 7 to you, Gal hears it at 30. That's how loud it is. So one of the things that's been hard at home, I can never vacuum if she's around because it freaks her out. She cannot stand it. She yells and asks me to stop. So one of the things that have been helpful is letting her know in advance, I'm going to vacuum. And she would sometimes go outside, sometimes go to her room and lock the door. And then she would just yell, Mommy, are you done? You know, she knows when I'm done, but she wants to make sure the noise is not there. But instead of freaking out, she knows what to do to help herself now. And I try to avoid vacuuming around her anyway, but sometimes, you don't have a choice. So what you mentioned about knowing how to help yourself really calms you down. And eventually we all learn how to do that. I was thinking, and I'm kind of curious if you learned anything about yourself and about your sensitivities or anything else through Emilio's sensitivities.
That's a very good question. I've never asked that question to myself. I think I've been too focused on like understanding his perspective of the world that I have forgotten how it was for me. I grew up in Mexico, and if you have been to Mexico, Mexico is loud. Um, there's a lot of experiences. It's overwhelming, and it's great for tourism because it's an explosion of everything: senses, flavors, music, textures, sounds. It's like that. So I can't imagine how it is for a sensitive person to grow up in Mexico. I don't think I've been super sensitive. I definitely, when I create my sculptures and my toys, I keep that in mind, because to me, that statement that art is not to be touched is an abomination. Art has to be touched, unless it's a painting. I'll give you that. But if it's a sculpture, it calls to be touched. And you have to give that experience. And at least that's what I do with my sculptures. I give them a visual, again, Mexico, lots of colors, lots of textures, but touch it. Like I've been taking my sculptures to schools, to even preschools or toddler centers, and the teachers are like, "Don't touch," and I'm like, "No, no, no. They are actually they are invited to touch them." Um, I tell them how to do it. I say, lift one little finger, and with that, you can touch it and feel the texture, the temperature, how one paint has a little, it's colder than another, how it feels in your fingers, and how that really connects to your brain. That's how I think that goes full circle. You see a sculpture or a piece of art, and once you touch it, it kind of seals the whole deal, like the whole experience. And that's what I did with Mistake. Um, I chose fabrics that were specifically different textures and different colors, so you have this experience, and it connects with you. Otherwise, you're just looking at something, and what's the point in that, right?
I absolutely agree. And I'm holding here the original Mistake that looked different. I actually bought this one from you before we even became partners.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember, I saw it. I saw you with Mistake at this business meeting, and I fell in love. I was in tears, so emotional, running. My brain was running with like 3,000 ideas a minute. And I bought this because when I was living in California, I used to teach art. I had an after school art program for kids, and I got him for my kids to help them when they struggle, when their creation is not perfect like they think it should be. And I remember looking at him, and then when we talked about the version, the final version, one of the things, and speaking of sensory sensitivities, one of the things that I love about the new one, this one is very creative and unique, and no one would ever have the same thing in the world. But the one you're holding, visually to me is more pleasing because the colors are solid. So even though there are a lot of different colors, here you have different textures just on one leg.
Yes.
This is a masterpiece from an artistic perspective. But when we were thinking about the kids, we wanted it to be fluffy and fun to touch, but we also wanted it to be not overwhelming. The interesting journey for me with Gal has been that I realized my own sensitivities through her experience. So I, for example, was never aware that I have issues with noise. I never realized it. I grew up, I'm the oldest of 6 siblings. So it was always, and an Israeli house, please. It was always very loud and noisy. And I never realized that it's overwhelming to me. I need to kind of crawl into my little, ball of like just quiet. But when I started to notice her reactions to things, I realized that I was feeling the same way. Um, so that was a really good experience for me. And also, Gal is underreactive and she loves to touch all the time. And I found out through her that I am overreactive. I need, more, gentle hugs, or I need to have a sense of space. Um, and again, like Julie said, how you can be both over and under. So I'm very over in the sense that I cannot stand tags, or, a hug needs to be a certain type of hug for me to actually enjoy it. But then if I go to get a massage, which I love, it has to be very deep. Otherwise, I don't feel it. So it's so interesting how each one of us can react to sensory information in so many different ways.
Not only sometimes we outgrow it and we ignore it, it's so hard, and that's also something I read, it's so hard to diagnose and so hard to determine if it's really an issue or it's like a mental issue, or it's just a physical, or it's a emotional. We don't know. I don't think we don't know even the 10% of what it is, because it is specific to each person.
Before we end this conversation, I really wanted to ask you if there was one message, because I mean, we chose this topic for a reason. And my question to you, if there was one message you wanted to give parents or educators related to this topic, what would it be? What would you like to tell them?
Oh my goodness.
From a mother's perspective.
From my perspective, having a curious kid that wants and needs to touch everything in order to process the world around him, don't be quick to judge. You don't know what's going on in the little brains, the little minds. It may be annoying to you as a grown-up to see those interactions in the playgrounds or in classrooms or play dates. But like observe, stop and observe what's going on. If it really needs your intervention because you see that's getting out of control, then do it. Other than that, just let them explore. Kids live in their own out-of-regulated kind of a universe, and sometimes we intervene too much and we stop those very important interactions.
Observation, I think, is key. I think that as parents, we always want to protect our kids and save them from the world. I know I do that constantly. And I feel like the biggest gift we can give our kids and our students, it's sometimes to just not do anything, just be there and observe. And as long as no one is in danger and as long as no one is hurt, to let them explore, to watch them and see what they do. Because I believe that in most cases, a lot of behavioral issues that we see with kids are not behavioral. They could be emotional, they could be sensory, they could be many other things that we as parents don't have the tools to identify. So I would just say observe, maybe even keep track of things that you feel that need more attention, and then go to professionals and figure out ways to help your child however you can. And also to teachers, they have more than one child at home, and they need to pay attention to many different children with many different issues, and really just to try to observe and get the attention, and then refer the parents to whoever could help that child.
I just want to add that subscribe to our Mistake of the Month. We have great content, especially curated for our audience. Follow us on all the social media, and if you have something else to share and you want to approach us, we are open to have conversations and include you in our content.
Thank you, guys. Bye, Mistake Club.
Bye.